So first thing, I think it's important to know what a founder's goal is. By default, it almost feels like in the startup world, every entrepreneur feels like they have to grow, but that might not actually be the right thing. So for me, first, it's important for a founder, especially in an SMB sized business, what do they want their personal life to look like? And then how should their business intersect with their personal vision? That's where you start defining what you want the culture of the business to be like.
What makes a top 1% COO? Could you highlight like a couple of differentiators people can look out for?
Definitely. That's a very good question. So one of them is that when you're a COO, it's a bit different than, let's say, you're a chief marketing officer or a chief financial officer. When you're a CMO or a CFO, you have to be really skilled in marketing, maybe even sales, but you don't have to be an expert in HR or IT or many other areas. And same with the CFO, you have to be really good at accounting and finance, but not necessarily an expert in marketing or sales or all of these other areas. But when you're a COO, you should have had experience in running pretty much every department of a business to make yourself what I would consider a top 1%. So you should have experience in all different areas of a business. Secondly, I prefer people who've worked in many different industries. When they've worked in many different industries, they've gained insights that are relevant in some industries that they're able to pull into new ones. And so they're able to bring very fresh perspectives into all kinds of different new contexts just because they've seen so much. And then the third thing is these should be people who work both in startup environments as well as large enterprises. So they've been able to see how to navigate, for example, in large enterprise, how to build consensus, how to navigate the culture that already exists.
You know, I've been thinking a lot about how demanding life as an entrepreneur can be. I realized I needed to make some changes and not just quick fixes. For me, it's about focusing on 5 key pillars: sleep, diet, exercise, stress management, and adding small tools that support those habits. One of the tools that's been helping me lately is Magic Mind. In the mornings, their focus shots help me stay clear and sharp throughout the day without those energy crashes. And in the evenings, their sleep shots have made winding down so much easier. I'm finally getting deeper, more restorative sleep. After just a few days, I noticed I was more productive during the day and better rested at night. It's been a game changer for managing stress and staying focused during podcast recordings like this one. If you're ready to invest in your mental wealth, I'd highly recommend trying Magic Mind. For the first time, they've bundled their focus and sleep shots together, and you get 45% off using my exclusive link, magicmind.com/HorizonJan. That's magicmind.com/HorizonJan. Check it out and start building your mental resilience today.
And then in startup environments, they've learned how to pivot, how to build up teams, how to create from scratch, how to pivot when one idea is working or not working. So these are 3 key components. And then there's a lot of the typical stuff like cultural fit, and just generally the way that they think through things.
Speaking of transferable insights, what key lessons from your Apple or Qualcomm days still resonate with your work today?
Yeah, one thing that I learned, especially at Apple has spent many decades in developing a culture that is very deep and very strong. And with culture, how I define that is that, let's say I'm a manager and there's a meeting that's happening where many of my team members are there. If I'm not there in that meeting, but my team members are there, if the culture is very strong, I will know exactly how they make decisions or how they process and come up with resolutions. I don't have to be there. That's when I know that there's a really strong culture. And Apple had developed a very fascinating culture where they've come up with values and behaviors associated with those values that can flow through every aspect of the organization, so that now everybody knows how they can think through things and what framework they can use. So developing a culture, building a culture, and maintaining it over the span of the 30 years that Apple's been around was something that I learned a lot in it, and now I apply it to pretty much every engagement.
That's an important point. I think often overlooked. We hear the word culture, but we're not really clear on its kind of a force multiplier and can create these virtuous cycles or inhibit them in the, I guess, if the culture is a mismatch. So yeah, very, very important. You spoke about strategy and how your advisors can roll up their sleeves for execution, whereas many other advisors stop at strategy. How does this approach set you apart, and why is execution often the stumbling block for SMBs?
When I first got into this area, I was first thinking maybe I should be an advisor, just like many of the other advisors that exist out there, which means maybe you meet once a week with a business, and maybe you provide some presentations or you provide some forms that they fill out, and then you give them some context based on their responses. I've actually had some business coaches myself and strategic advisors myself, and they were very helpful for a couple of months. Then eventually I realized that my own to-do list just got longer and longer. Every time I spoke with them, I just had an immensely, like exponentially growing to-do list, and I never got to all those things. And then I also did realize that I didn't have necessarily the skills to get to all of those different areas or the interest to get to all of those areas. So it became eventually a waste of money or time to have advisors that were just providing me advice. And so that's where I felt that it was important now to not develop another management advising firm, but instead a COO firm where chief operating officers, I feel their duty is not just to come up with strategy, but then how to roll up their sleeves and actually implement that strategy. And so that's what we do. And that's in each of our engagements, each of our COOs, they first figure out many of the things that an advisor might be able to do, except they pull from their like years of experience across lots of different industries and different contexts. And then now they actually, having gained the context of working embedded in that business, they're able to provide ideas that actually are more relevant. And then now once they start executing themselves, the type of feedback they get, the type of results that they get, now it all rolls back into the next iteration of strategic advice. So this combination of strategy plus now you actually implement it yourself, I found ends up resulting in better outcomes than if I was only focused on strategy.
You have built up a number of companies, like we mentioned at the beginning, and a few of those were acquired, which I want to get to, but I'd like to go back to culture and ask you what are the key ingredients for creating a culture primed for scaling?
So first thing, I think it's important to know what a founder's goal is. By default, it almost feels like in the startup world, every entrepreneur feels like they have to grow, but that might not actually be the right thing. That might not be the right answer for somebody. So for me, first, it's important for a founder, especially in an SMB size business, it's important for a founder to know what do they want their personal life to look like, and then how should their business intersect with their personal vision. So for some people, it actually might be relevant to have a business that is stable and steady, and maybe they have a certain balance in their work life and outside of work life. For some people, maybe their ambition is larger and they want to be in a context of growing. And there's a reason that they want to be in a context of growing that matches their personal desires. So I think first is to really understand what you want. Now, how does that intersect with your business and what the goals of the business are? Now, based on that, that's where you start defining what you want the culture of the business to be like. And just for a point of reference, the last business that I'd acquired, when there was a team that came with it, and they had first signed up for a culture when they joined the prior management team of being a lifestyle business. And even the prior management team, they had designed the business so that it would work around their personal life. And now when I came in, my ambitions were to grow the business. And so I wanted to change the culture. But the team that came in with the business, that was not what they had signed up for. So I was actually doing a disservice to them by trying to change what their personal preferences were and why they signed up for that business in the first place. So it ended up being a big taxing emotionally and physically, and eventually into the business as well, trying to change that culture with that existing team. So all of this to go back to now, what is culture? For me, culture is two pieces. One is values, and the second is behaviors that define those values. So for example, let's say if my personal ambition, which flows into what my ambition for the business is to be around scaling and growth. And maybe for the type of business that I have, it requires there to be a level of meticulousness in everything that gets done, so that like everybody is double checking, triple checking things. So maybe that is a value because whatever the goals are of the business, as well as what the needs are day to day of the business. So maybe a value is meticulousness. Now I would try and figure out what are behaviors that would model what meticulousness looks like that I'd want to see in this business. So I define maybe 2 to 4 different behaviors. Like, for example, every time I create a spreadsheet, I'm going to create an error checking mechanism where I'll use to cross check all the numbers that are in there. So perhaps that might be a behavior that is relevant. And so, like with a set of behaviors like this, now people can actually in the team, once I start bringing this culture and spreading this culture around, firstly, I have to be the role model of that as a leader. And then now, when I start talking about this, promoting this culture, and even exemplifying it myself, now people will know what behaviors specifically can they take that'll help define what meticulousness looks like. And then eventually now I like to incorporate culture into weekly meetings and talking about it or acknowledging people that are exhibiting the culture. And then I'd even filter it into performance reviews and reward people monetarily for matching a culture.
SMB owners face many hurdles, such as burnout or revenue diversification. What are the top 2 to 3 challenges you see, and how do you typically address them?
I think burnout is actually a very interesting one, and that often comes from where a founder is more involved in day to day operations than they should be. And I found that most people are one of two. They're either a great visionary, they're able to think through where they want things to go to, or secondarily, they're really good at operations or execution. I think there's 90% of people that are either one or the other, and maybe only 5 or 10% of people that can actually do both successfully. So it's important for people to first figure out which of these two are they. And it's very unlikely that they're both. So which of these are they, a visionary type or are they an execution type? And now for whatever they are not, they find the right people to help them fill in that gap. So many people, many founders, I see that they try and become much more involved in execution when actually their mindset and their skill level is really focused on vision, being a visionary, or vice versa. And so now, if they define that, now they can actually operate their business appropriately and fill in all the gaps with the things that they should not be working on. So I think this is one of the key areas. And second is, which I think you probably heard very often, is where people try and go too wide too soon. I see this day in, day out with all the different businesses we interact with, where let's say somebody does have a vision, a founder does have a vision, and they want to get there. And usually visions are quite broad and often larger than what is realistic. So now, in order to meet their vision, they end up spreading themselves too thin. They spread their team too thin rather than diving deep. So, for example, let's say a founder wants to develop a new sales channel or they want to start growing their revenue. The way that I like to approach this is first, let's come up with a hypothesis of who is our ideal customer, where do they hang out, whether online or offline, and then now what are the mechanisms that exist to reach them in those places they hang out. Now let's come up with 2 to 4 tests of channels that we can use to try and actually reach them in those places that they hang out. So we'll do a test for, let's say, a month or two. We'll have very specific parameters that we're looking for to figure out are we actually able to reach them? Is that channel actually successful or not? And then now, once we reach the end of that 1 to 2 months, and we've got some indication that out of these 2 to 4 tests, 1 or 2 of them seem to be doing better. Now scrap the rest and just take that one and dive deep into that. And now let's invest time into it. Let's invest money into it. And let's dive deeper into making that successful. Don't continue utilizing all 3, 4 channels for the longer period of time. Just take one, dive deep.
So, ScaleUpExec.com is your website. Where can listeners learn more about your company or connect with you if they're looking to scale your business or hire a fractional COO?
Yep, ScaleUpExec.com actually has a link to my calendar, and you can write, and I personally look at every message. And even if somebody's just curious to bounce some ideas off, not necessarily to hire somebody, I love to just talk with people and understand their context and see if I can give any relevant, meaningful advice. So ScaleUpExec.com is a great place to find me, or my LinkedIn profile. I share a lot of my thoughts or views on how I approach business on my LinkedIn.
And you've already worked with some excellent clients, as you pointed out, McKinsey and Company, Bain and Company, et cetera. So really nice website and company you've put together. Congratulations on the 2024 award. And here's hoping for an equally, if not even more impressive 2025.
Thank you so much, David. Really fascinating discussion with you. Thank you.
Pleasure.